Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of You and Me and Multiple Sclerosis. My name is Pam, and I've been dealing with multiple sclerosis as an integral part of my life for almost 37 years. I want to talk to you today about a word that I came across that I'd never heard of before. It's called the prodrome. Many syndromes actually have a prodrome. Autism has a prodrome. Heart disease has a prodrome, but MS has a prodrome, believe it or not. And I want to know a little bit more about that. So I'm going to talk about that in just a minute here, but by popular demand, I'm going to talk about my tea and the mug that it's in. Today, my tea is orange and clove, and it's quite good. I'm having my second cup, and I'm very much enjoying it. The mug that I'm using today, I don't know, you may recognize this kind of a mug because this is an oldie. I think I've had this since the 1980s. I used to use this at work. I was an editor and I liked to have a cup of coffee on my desk, but the sign of an editor, we always used to say, was that the cup of coffee on your desk was always stone cold because you'd barely get it poured and then you'd have to either take a phone call or run off somewhere to get something. And your coffee was never warm by the time you got back to it. Well, without any more fussing around, I want to tell you a little bit about the MS Prodrome and invite you to be thinking about this as well. Rather than define it myself, I'm going to go over and have Dr. Aaron Boster define it for you. And if you have not watched him on YouTube, you really should. He has many, many videos about multiple sclerosis, and I find them all very useful. And I ran across this one. I had to know, what is an MS Prodrome? Well, let's hear what Dr. Boster says it is.
It turns out that there is a prodrome which can precede MS by upwards of 5 years before the first classical symptoms present. And that's what we're going to be discussing today, the multiple sclerosis prodrome. Now, a prodrome is defined as an early set of clinical signs and symptoms which might indicate the onset of a disease before more diagnostically specific signs and symptoms develop. And it's taken from the Greek word prodromus, which apparently means running before. That makes sense.
Okay, so according to Dr. Boster, the prodrome is a set of symptoms, or a symptom even, that just kind of happens before you have any symptom that someone might tie to multiple sclerosis. And as I watched the rest of his video, he talked about the database from which the studies were taken is based on Canada, which has a nationalized health system. So people do go to the doctor a lot more than they probably do in America, which does not have a nationalized health system. And also the data are not as easily aggregated in the United States as they are in Canada. Well, be that as it may, the Canadian data has been mined by several different studies in several different ways over time, and they're finding out that people with multiple sclerosis, within 5 years of being diagnosed with MS, will actually have other symptoms, whether those be bladder-related, spinal cord-related, vertigo. There's a number of different symptoms that you can have that would not be related to MS or wouldn't probably even raise any eyebrows particularly. Not likely you're going to get an MRI over that. The studies mainly are just looking at hospitalizations, doctor visits, prescriptions written within 5 years of the time that a person is diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And so they're really thinking that there is a prodrome for MS, and I'm not going to dispute that. Let me just show you the opening slide of one other video that I looked at. And this one is an episode of Real Talk MS from 2020, I believe. And the reason that I put it up here is that it talks about the prodrome. The person they are interviewing is someone named Dr. Helen Tremlett. And I noticed as I look around at MS Prodrome, her name comes up quite a lot. So I think that she is a key figure in looking at the MS Prodrome. And you might look at this video. I'll leave the link down below, and a couple others that I found that you might be interested in looking at. But I'm actually very curious to know whether or not you have had symptoms that would fall under what we might think of as the MS Prodrome. Multiple sclerosis is a pretty idiosyncratic disease, right? In every person, it manifests differently. And there might be some commonalities or things that statistically are more frequent, like optic neuritis or spasticity. But there are a number of other symptoms that you would not really connect with multiple sclerosis. And some of the ones like bladder problems, I don't think anyone who had no other MS symptoms would ever connect that. And neither would most doctors, because if you have a bladder problem, you go to a urologist or your GP. Neither of them is going to immediately think multiple sclerosis, right? If you went to a neurologist with it, maybe. But even then, I'm not really sure that would be true. They might say, well, why are you coming to me? I don't deal with the bladder. You need to go down the hall to the urology department. That would make sense. Well, okay, so then I got to thinking, if this is a really idiosyncratic disease, maybe I've had the prodrome and I didn't even know. But as far as all the things that they talked about, I didn't have any of that. And I certainly didn't rack up a lot of doctor visits or prescriptions or hospitalizations or any of that in the 5 years, in the 10 years, in the 20 years prior to my diagnosis of MS. What did I have? Let me think. Were there any symptoms that I could attribute to multiple sclerosis looking back? Because that's the thing about the prodrome. You don't really know until you look back on it that there was something there. And that's what the studies have to focus on right now. It's not really in the stage where they can do a lot of predicting, but it is helpful, I suppose, if they can see that it's common, that they could at least be considering multiple sclerosis if you keep presenting with certain other symptoms that don't necessarily seem to scream multiple sclerosis at you. I didn't have any of the symptoms that were mentioned, and I wondered if I had any. And as far as I know, all I can remember is that all my life, pretty much, I have felt a lot of sensitivity to heat and cold. I would sometimes have clouded vision as a result of either being in the cold or being in the heat. And that, of course, is a symptom or a sign, a corollary thing that goes along with having multiple sclerosis, having these kinds of vision problems where your vision does funny things when you're outside your comfort range of temperatures. So that could have been the prodrome at work. I don't know. I really can't say. I think I would not really be very helpful in any study that they did as far as, have you had symptoms before you were diagnosed with multiple sclerosis that would fit into this idea that there's a prodrome? I'm not going to say there isn't one. I'm just going to say that I really don't think anything that I had going in the 5 years prior to my first identifiable MS symptom, which was optic neuritis. We later realized, of course, that that was the first symptom of multiple sclerosis, but in my day, in the mid-80s, they were very cautious about diagnosing your MS. So I had optic neuritis off and on for a number of years before I finally did get diagnosed as having multiple sclerosis. And I had a few other minor symptoms along the way that made them feel a little more confident that I did indeed have multiple sclerosis, but they did not want to tell me that that's what I had. So I went a long time knowing I had it without actually having that confirmed. Before the optic neuritis, though, which was, I remember the day, it was January 5th, 1985. It was 2 days after my 25th birthday, actually. So how could I forget a thing like that? But in the 5 years before that, or the 10 years, or the whatever, did I have anything else that really fits like a prodrome kind of a thing? I don't think I did. I'd be curious to know if that would be true for you. When you look over some of these videos, when you think about what I'm saying here today, Does any of that make sense? Do you recognize those symptoms in yourself and you think about your own health history? Did it support the studies that have been done on the prodrome? Or is this just a nice idea, but it's got a long way to go before it can be used to predict the occurrence of MS in a person? Well, that's all I had for you today. Take care, and I will see you again in my next video.